Uh, Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the lab. We hope everyone's having a great weekend. We know we are. Hope you guys have been enjoying the last round of interviews, with Alan Obst from Tennis Australia. And then last week's episode with AZ, Annette Zapp, on firefighter wellness and preparation. So thank you both for joining me for those awesome interviews. I had so much fun, and I hope you all enjoyed the episodes as well. For today, you have David and I, and we are going to have a little bit of fun, just kind of more of a discussion on maybe what we do in the clinic and maybe just some little clinical pros for you developing physical therapy students. Um, but no, I have three different topics, but for today, what we're going to focus on really is just how you can start including strength training to the unaffected areas, maybe that you have not injured. Maybe this could be just a few examples. This could be like post-op surgical. Maybe you just had an ACL. Maybe there's certain things you can do. Maybe it's certain things you're not sure you could do or should do. So Dave and I are going to have some fun with this today. So thanks for joining me today, Dave.
No problem. Happy to be on. But yeah, like you said, I think the easiest way to view this is probably like the upper or lower extremity post op. We can get more specific, like little nicks and dings and stuff like that. But um, just off the top, as soon as I have people who come in with like a sling or a brace, probably about like week 1 to 2, depending on who they are. I'm trying to get them back into the gym and just train the larger unaffected areas.
Mhm.
And I would say that's from a number of standpoints, right? So you kind of have one, I'd say your mental health is probably going to be the thing that is the most imperative to that person.
Mhm.
So getting them in some sort of routine and making them feel like they're making progress. So if you can make it a clear split between upper and lower days, I think it helps break up the monotony of rehab because the first 6 to 8 weeks are pretty boring.
Yeah.
So getting them on that, if they're in the clinic, let's say it's Monday, Wednesday, making sure the training lowers like Tuesday, Thursday, or something like that is probably going to be something that's pretty low hanging fruit for them
Mhm.
and easy to do, right? So your caveats there are, if you have a person in a arm sling, be sure that they're using more machine based pieces and maybe not loading the top of the shoulder,
Mhm.
um, depending on their sensitivity to it. So, like we said, that the mental health side is something, but then you're also getting the secondary effects of the uh, hormonal cascade. So
Mhm.
that's something that I'm pretty implicit on day one.
Mhm.
You get secondary growth hormone if you train legs, if you have a shoulder surgery, and vice versa. So if you have an ACL and you're hitting stuff like pecs, lats, shoulders, upper back, um, you're still getting a nice global hormonal response if you're training that relatively heavy and being smart about it, which is going to have secondary trickle down effects to the actual affected limb itself.
Mhm. Good. I'm glad you mentioned the growth hormone there because that's actually, gosh, I feel like the entire time you were talking, I was having little flashbacks to my pec tear. Um, when I had initially torn my pec, one of the biggest things that I think that kind of saved me in the long run with just maintaining my leg strength was I was using a belt squat. I would set up two boxes. I would put on a chain belt and I would just put up as many plates as possible and just do like a modified belt squat. So those are definitely good ways and good things to kind of keep in mind. Um, I somewhat agree with you on the use of the machines. Um, I think I mean I think you can also use maybe some dumbbells in there. I mean, I wouldn't limit just two machines, but I do agree with you that start with the most stability possible. I definitely think that's something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah,
Um,
it just depends on the area. Like if you have an ACL tear and you can comfortably get dumbbells loaded,
sure.
great. This is more of the shoulder using the lower half
Okay. Yeah,
in
that's
in
good.
this caveat.
Okay.
Like
I just
so
want
just
to
strictly
sure.
avoiding deadlift squats and all that other barbell based movements.
You don't want a labor repair putting 315 pounds in their hand?
Yeah,
What?
maybe let's do a really heavy pharma carry or something and see if it's still on there.
Mhm. It's still attached? Yep, we're good. Okay, cool. No, I like that, Dave. I definitely think that training the opposite side limb can also sometimes be beneficial as well. I mean, obviously not going too crazy with training that, but sometimes there can be some conversion between the two sides. Like for example, you can't do particular movements. Let's say that post-op ACL, you can't do particular movements yet with that other, with the surgical side. Maybe you're going to be doing them on the other side just to kind of one not lose any kind of benefits that you had. You want to kind of keep away the detraining effects as they're going through the rehab process. That I think sometimes people are so afraid to load people and so afraid to put people in those situations to like for example post-op ACL they can totally lift their upper body like there's no reason why they shouldn't be lifting their upper body but I think sometimes as physical therapists we become very hesitant and very cautious with doing that and I think that sometimes plays to our detriment because then all of a sudden we see a bigger global detraining effect not just in the area that was the surgical limb but now also in basically their upper body as well, which is no bueno. It's not good.
And that's a good point with like using the opposite limb. So a lot of times, um, I'm having like let's just use the ACL as an example, right? So they all like the quad set like basically after a week or something like that.
Hmm.
So getting the other limb to contract at the same time and basically playing on those like bilateral neural connections creates a stronger contraction in the actual surgical limb itself because it has a recognition of what's supposed to happen.
Hmm.
So making sure that like you are doing that and basically just trying to get a good squeeze is probably a good idea.
Hmm.
It's a little bit more in like the bro science category, but like if you can recognize a strong connection on one side of your body, like if you're doing like a tricep extension, then like, oh, my surgical side can actually recognize that this is how it's supposed to feel.
Hmm.
That's a really good idea to like have that start pretty soon.
Hmm. That's a good point.
And I guess as far as like the fear continuum,
Hmm.
I would 2 weeks maybe. And half of that's just because you're wanting the incision to heal and you're not sending them into like a gym to go get like MRSA or something. But like outside of that, like I don't really see any like reason to not do it as long as the person's gonna be lucid when you have the conversation and not a jackass about it.
I agree with you. I definitely think you got to pick your person of who you're gonna. I mean, sometimes what I'll do is like if I have that younger athlete who wants to get back in the gym, I always make sure I have another pair of eyes on them in some way, whether if it's a brother, sister,
And
maybe mom,
parents,
dad, yeah,
yep,
somebody to be, or maybe even a coach. Um, and I've had a few kids who are like, can I at least do like, can I at least do upper body? And it's like, yeah, sure. Like you can lift your upper body. We can do bench press you can do a seated strict press. Like there's different things that we can start doing now, but like I don't want you grabbing the 50-pound dumbbells and walking it back to the rack if you're post-op ACL or you roll your ankle and you had something done to it now. It's like I don't want you doing that. If that's the case, you need to be doing something. We need to be smarter about this. Um,
yeah, drawing very defined lines
hmm.
probably a good thing in this population too. Like
Hmm.
I basically am just like, hey, just leave everything on X extremity to me. You're cleared to do this, and this, and be smart about it.
Hmm.
So it's like with the pec tear stuff. I mean, basically, I would just be like, hey, everything upper body, don't think about it yet. I will clear you as it becomes a thing, and as we like clear something in here and it feels good. Wait a week and then add it back in.
Hmm.
But I think that would be like key around that verbiage
Hmm.
because some people just take it and run with it. It's kind of a learned skill, I guess I would say at this point.
Yeah. I
You know, like
do like the fact that you give guidelines though. I think that's very important. Um, just to kind of keep people reined in. Because they're
yep,
going to get back. You give an inch, they're going to take a mile.
yeah, and I do think that there's something to be said about the barter with this too, right?
Hmm.
So with like my shoulders, um, I'll try to get them doing like push-ups as soon as possible, but it's just a modified depth. So like
Hmm.
basically, if you have like boards available to you, you can like picture like a quote unquote like board press. They
Yeah.
have like 4, 3, 2, 1 or whatever.
Hmm.
So I'll try to get them to do like basically tricep push-ups to like a ball or like a high board and then
Hmm.
just ratchet them down so they feel like they're getting a little bit of what they want and vice versa. So there's ways to do that too, where you can kind of barter with the patient, but the key thing is that you are keeping them involved and not making them feel isolated from their sport or their community. I
Right.
know like CrossFitters are huge on this, and it's really hard like when you're in that community to be away from it the same way you feel like you're part of a team. So giving them a little bit of stuff to do around
Hmm.
that community is like very key as well for like keeping morale and mental health high.
Correct. Yeah.
Because
Uh,
unfortunately, athletes tend to be all or nothing, uh, and that's just like the way it works. I'm not
yeah.
sure why. It's just like they are very unidirectionally focused at that time, and it's something like I've actually like matured out of. I guess I'd say as I remove myself from athletics.
Hmm.
I might operate in the gray a little bit more, but they probably aren't seeing it that way at that time,
Hmm.
and their entire identity is getting taken from them. So more reason to even get them in the gym with their team
Hmm.
versus isolate them on an island.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I 100% agree with you because I've heard people who say that like if you put them in that situation, they're just gonna want to they're gonna be more irritated because they want to be back sooner. And it's like I can kind of see both ends of that spectrum where like yes, if they are in that room with their team, then they're wanting to get back. That's gonna it yeah, they're gonna want to do things more and they're gonna want I think it's gonna motivate them more than be a negative. But it
That's
also
kind of the way
gives
I see it.
the what?
The motivation factor. I think it's just like, but you're
Mhm.
staying involved is like always my thought on that.
Exactly. And I love that because I think you would rather I would rather be having them around people and in the community, people that are going to support them, be like, oh, how's your progress going? Like when you coming back? And it's like they can actually like update people on like how they're doing, which I also love as well. Um, that I think, yeah, I love that aspect of things because you keep them immersed, you keep the wheels turning, you keep everyone constantly engaged, makes for a better process.
I'd say
But
like at higher levels too, it's a good look to your coach.
true, yeah, especially if you want to have that person constantly engaged and constantly moving forward. And let's say they had a starting position before, um, maybe they want it back. You know what I mean? Um,
Yep.
so I mean, if they're constantly engaged with you and they're showing up at practice and coach sees that, that also probably bodes well for when they eventually do make a return back. I mean, those are all going to be playing factors when they eventually do make their 100% return.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. I feel like we've hit the surgical piece on the head.
Yeah, be smart,
Um,
be dumb.
yeah, and it's also like an opportunity to bring up some weaknesses too. So,
Hmm.
whenever this stuff happens and you do get nicked or you get dinged or whatever, you might have things available to you that are now in play that you sucked at too. So if you have an ACL and your bench press sucks or your triceps are weak, I mean, this is a great time to address it.
Hmm.
Or vice versa, if you're a pitcher and all of a sudden you have a Tommy John or labor repair,
Hmm.
um, get into your legs, man. Get into your legs really hard. That's gonna like take you a lot further than anything in your shoulder or elbow ever could.
Maybe that was the chicken to begin with. You never know.
Yep.
There's
That
always golden lining there, or silver lining, I should say. Golden lining. Ooh, but maybe we'll use golden lining. Um, no, that's a perfect point. I mean, let's say if you're non-surgical and you are experiencing pain, let's say upper body, what would be some things for the lower body maybe that would be available, or maybe some modifications to use? So, like, if you're having pain in the shoulder and you can't get your arm back into an external rotation for the back squat, see if the area where you're at has a safety squat bar. If they don't, there's other little modifications that you can use with wrist wraps. Like there's little things
yep.
that you guys can start doing.
If you guys haven't looked up a Hatfield squat, this was literally invented because the guy had surgery on his shoulder. So, and you can get super heavy with it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, out of I guess injury came innovation there, and like now you use it to overload your nervous system before you're going into a heavy squat. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's a million ways to, you know, skin the cat here. It's just a matter of what specifically you're talking about. Who
Hmm.
is your client, and I guess like three, are you being clear with them?
True. True. And don't give them a modification without instructing and showing them one. Like I had a patient who they were supposed to just change the way that they were benching and they weren't really given much of an instruction besides just move your hands. And they were like, what does that mean? And I'm like, okay, well, your grip width. And we literally had to go through that. That was a while ago. Um, that just sticks on. Just move your hands. Like that was all it was. Just move your hands. I was like, where wider, narrower? Like, did they explain anything? No. Okay, well then, why are you going to them? Like, for the love of all that is good and holy, like we need to
Yeah,
change. Oh.
and a lot of times it's more of like your elbow position too.
Hmm.
So like that's pretty nondescript. Like you can go super wide and then still be benching here at like a 90-degree angle and shearing the shit out of your pec or your shoulder, rather than like getting inside and trying to like externally rotate the bar. And then all of a sudden they draw a very bad um, thought process with said movement just because you didn't correct the position.
Yep.
Or it's
Oh.
like your ACL if you're like trying to get into a squat and all of a sudden they do a knee dominant squat rather than sitting back and trying to just get the pattern.
Hmm.
They're going to have a ton of like patellar pain because they just bowstring the hell out of their knee. And now they think squatting's bad because you didn't take the time to just show them to sit back, get into their hips, or address a box squat first, or whatever it might be.
Hmm. Like it takes 2 seconds.
Yep.
Just educate, teach, take the time. Don't just like, oh, just change this, and then they are out to pasture, not exactly sure what the hell to do.
Yep. If you take the 2 seconds, all of a sudden you have a tool in the toolbox that you can use to periodize and make them feel good about themselves rather than just squatting is bad for your knees
Yeah. Throw
or
them the tools.
overhead press is bad for your shoulder or deadlift is bad for your back, whatever, you know,
Hmm.
dumb surgeon they're using at the time that says this like dumb antidote to them.
Hmm. Yeah. There's, oh man, so many nightmare stories. But no, so Dave, is there anything in particular else you wanted to talk about with like the detraining effect? And like when we have someone who has an injury or is post-surgical, maybe some other little caveats maybe we should touch on.
I think the cardiovascular piece is probably a good one to do.
Good
I think
point.
we talked about like hypertrophy and strength and like all that stuff kind of covered in that.
Hmm.
Um, so uh, the true way you get recovery is unfortunately blood flow, which needs to happen through walking, biking, rowing, some sort of like cardio that they can tolerate.
Hmm.
So, I mean, be sure that you are including this at some point. It does not have to be high intensity,
No.
but it should be instructed that, like, on the days in between sessions, like, everybody wants to use the vaso devices. They want to use ice. They want to use heat. They want to use this. They want to use that. It's just like, just do a 20-minute bike at a
Yep.
low intensity and be done.
Hmm.
Blood flow equals healing, and that's the only way that you get it.
Yep. Stimulating the process.
Yep. I mean, we can like dive back into this and like how to be smart about programming cardio and like how there's like two or three different ways that you want to do it. But
Hmm.
for right now, this kind of like that moderate list type of cardio, at least in the acute phase, is probably what you want to use in the 10 to 20-minute domain.
Yeah, I like the long, slow distances for like my post-ops. Like if I have someone who's, let's say, post-op labral or rotator cuff repair, and they want to just sit there on the bike and they just want to pedal, I'm not going to have you sit there and do minute on, minute off interval training like in the very beginning. Like if you're, that's going to feel like a jackhammer at your incision area or at your surgical area, and that's not going to feel very good. I mean, oh, just not a fun experience. And so, like, if you can think about that long, slow distance, I love that, Dave. I love that you bring that up. Um, I think even just going for a walk, I think can sometimes be very just like beneficial. It gets you outside, it gets you moving a little bit more. Like when people are like me, for example, I know I went through like I mean, heck, you want to talk about mental health when we first started my post-op after my pec tear, and things were not all great upstairs because I was like, oh my gosh, like I never would have anticipated. Like I wasn't doing anything like crazy bad. I think I was just doing a little bit too much, not enough sleep, and a few other things. But I mean, I remember I did not want to leave the recliner for the first like week because of how bad it felt. Then all of a sudden, it's like I started like I remember Alex like pulled me into the gym with her. And so I would be just walking and I would just go on a walk while she was doing the class, and then I would come back in, and then I was like, all right, I gotta get going again. Like this is not me. I don't feel like this. Um so we got things moving. She pulled me out of my dumpy dumps and got me moving. So
Yeah. And
walk.
I mean that like hits some serotonin for you too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things like you're playing more on like the hormonal side as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's outside, great. I mean, like you're hitting dopamine, serotonin, you're staying out of a depression cycle by doing stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's key. And it's like that's one of like the biggest things I think I tell my acute back pain people to do
Mm-hmm.
is just walk for a number of different reasons. But blood flow, general movement, and then just avoiding the depressive cycle is probably the stuff that I'm trying to hit the most.
Yeah, I agree. There's a few different things you can get into with aerobics. Um, I mean, heck, if you have an assault bike and you can't use one of your legs, you can prop it up and you can just do arms. Um, Obviously, we talked about walking outside. There's a lot of different options. Like you're only going to be limited by your imagination with a lot of these exercises aerobically and strengthening. You just got to make sure that you're keeping the
You know,
restrictions in mind.
so there's rowers, there's ski ergs, there's all this other stuff. So figure it out. If you
Exactly.
want it, you'll get it.
Exactly. Just got to be smart. Just got to be smart and creative. Have fun with it. I mean, that's half the battle sometimes. I think people get stuck in the nuance of um, planning things out all the time and making sure that everything is set in stone and ready to go. And sometimes I think we just need to have fun with it. Like if you're post-op, you want to keep things low and slow, and you just want to go for a walk, go for the walk. You want to go ride a bike,
Yep.
go ride a bike. Just be smart about it.
Yep. Progression isn't linear, guys.
Hmm. You can't accelerate
Unfortunately.
healing, and you can't accelerate healing. That's why I think sometimes people get up like, oh, if we do this, I'm gonna take another month off my rehab process. It's like you want to be smart about this. You don't want to go throwing yourselves at the wolves, and the next thing you know, you're right back at square one again. So like, take it as it is. I mean, we can even talk about like training volume, Dave. So like, um, post-op surgically, like what is an entry point for like training volume, and like what's a training point for load or an entry point for loading? Um, I think I think you and I have already like harped on this before. We are chronic underloaders as it comes as a profession, where we're not loading people high enough. But at the same time, I think how should people go about finding what's a good entry point for adding load? Like maybe what would be like some like little things to look for? Like, okay, we can start adding weight, but how do I do that effectively and safely?
The way I'm always using a pain scale. So number one, if you're kind of in like the 1 to 3 and achy category, that to me says it's bony remodeling. And
Hmm.
then if it's higher than that, it just means it's a tissue tolerance issue. So it doesn't mean it's a bad exercise. It just means readdress it at a later date. So
Hmm.
explaining that to them and being like, this isn't bad because of that. Just put it over here,
Hmm.
and then we'll talk about it in like a week or two. Another thing that I'm pretty adamant on is not doing stuff every day. So this,
Hmm.
of course, is it's range of motion dependent. I mean, like if you're getting locked up in like an ACL, like you're losing flexion or you don't have extension, like that's a different thing. But if you have it, and it's pretty apparent that you have it, like explain to them, don't do things every day. Like do them every other day and just be meaningful with it
Hmm.
is probably a good thing too.
Hmm.
So I think it's crazy that we get these people out of a post-op setting and then we're like, do this 3 times a day. It's like, why? They weren't doing jack shit before this happened, and all of a sudden you want them to do an exercise regimen 3 times a day that makes complete and utter like no sense.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to me. And they have to do this for 6 to 9 months now.
Yeah.
So what? And like if you're not making them feel like they need a day off, then you are underloading them.
Hmm.
Obviously, this is very different in the acute from the subacute to like the late stage, but
Hmm.
establishing that like 2 to 3 days a week, put your mindfulness to your rehab and be done and just let it recover on the off days is probably going to yield a better result than the person who's like more is better.
Yep.
Once again, you're not considering physiological time frames. The like healing is like at its most at that point. Uh,
Hmm.
and like obviously you need to stack bricks higher to build a house. So if you keep taking off the bottom layer of bricks because you just have them do the heel slides into oblivion or isometrics 50 times a day, like what does that look like at week 6? They're just pissed at you and wondering why they're not progressing when you just continually violate strength conditioning principles that are day one and you wouldn't do if you were in that situation.
Hmm. Whoa.
Bless you.
Hey, no, I love that. No, that is spot on. One thing I think in terms of like training volume, like you already talked about, and the HEP, um, that's definitely something I think that needs to be addressed in school is that, or maybe even in clinical rotations. I've kind of come to find we don't have a whole lot of great clinical rotations available for those who want to get into orthopedics and sports medicine. And I think that one thing that needs to be changed is how we go about educating physical therapy students and how I feel like I mean you can correct me if you feel like I'm wrong, but I feel like it becomes more volume based as opposed to actually like addressing like some of those different aspects where like
Yeah. So you're trying to like
hit
basically
the caseload.
hypertrophy, right?
Yeah. And it's like I
Like,
just feel like that's wrong.
I mean, I'm going to throw some shade. I don't even think the people that are in the spots are necessarily the most qualified for them, either based upon their personal interest, but
Yeah.
that's neither here nor there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I do just feel like it becomes like a personal hobby when it meets your clinical setting. That's just kind of when rubber meets road more than anything else.
Yeah, I think it needs to be addressed that like if you're going to be a clinical instructor, you should be having some form of curriculum or something that you're going to be teaching the student while they're with you. And I think that that gets missed 100%, like not 100% of the time. That was a big jump. It gets missed a lot. I mean, I've had a few people where like they go on the rotation and then they come back and it's like all they've had is volume, volume, volume. And it's like, what did you learn? Like, what did you take from the rotation? Well, I learned that I don't want to work there. It's like, okay, what else did you learn? It's like, what did you take away from your CI? Like, that's
I
what
wish it was longer. I think that's kind of the thing to take from this.
hmm.
So if it's 12 weeks and you're just trying to get to entry level, like unfortunately, that's just being able to see a patient an hour
Yeah.
and then document it. So it's not necessarily anything to do with like the skill level, the thought process.
Hmm.
Um, I do think there's a couple places, at least that I've heard, that are doing it pretty well.
Hmm.
One of them's that rehab to perform. I've had 2 or 3 people that I've talked to, and like they just get questioned into oblivion and asked about intervention. So that's kind of cool.
That is good.
So I feel like catering to that environment and asking like what's optimal is
Hmm.
always a really good thing to ask yourself.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think too. Something just popped into my head. It's a little backtracky,
Hmm.
but that post-operative person too, you need to consider where they were before the surgery.
Hmm.
So this is why Cam Akers, Adrian Peterson, Aaron Rodgers, they all make us look bad because they're professional athletes.
Hmm.
And the patient needs to understand that that's not on the table for them because you're not them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just kind of the only other thing I wanted to add.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, it just kind of popped in the back of my head there.
Um, I definitely think that that is important to talk about because then everyone thinks that they have to follow their protocol, their return to like whatever you were doing sport wise. And if they
Yeah,
can't do it, then that kind of sets like a negative narrative that like I'm really broken.
yeah,
Um,
you're not returning in 6 months, guys, and you don't have millions of dollars on the line to do so. And by the way, your parents weren't his parents, and he didn't squat 600 pounds and break every record in Oklahoma. So get out of your head. You're not him.
you know,
You're not that guy. I'm
I
not that guy. So
wish.
check that ego and throw it in the trash can.
No, but then the last little part of that, I guess, kind of going back to my original point about bringing up the clinical instructor stuff, is that like I think that if we could do a better job of educating our students on like looking at exercise volume, like looking at like I mean, if you were to total like their exercise volume up in an entire week of physical therapy, it's not going to be a tremendous amount. But that's why, like in those very first few stages, when you're giving them more like leeway in the gym, and then you're also trying to provide a like a rehabilitation program for them, monitoring that volume and kind of seeing where the sign and symptoms are kind of popping up at is going to be really important, especially as they start progressing through that. And I think sometimes we don't do a great job of addressing like, okay, they're having pain, take it away. Like, no, like there needs to be more of a thought process behind that than just let's just remove the movement.
Yeah.
There needs to
How
be a
many
thought.
sets? What was your rest? What was the load?
Thank you.
You need to go
Yes,
into that more.
exactly. I think that that gets missed like a lot, and we need to start changing that so that we can begin making better decisions for our patients. We can begin getting them back to more active lifestyles more efficiently. But then also so that when we have those patients and the buy-in is going to be there because now we're allowing them to go back in the gym. We're their partner in crime, managing their return to sport, returning them to the gym, whatever have you. We're their buddy. We're there to get them back to what they want to do and what they love. And we need to be efficient at that. And I just feel like as a profession, we're not there yet across the board. I think there's some really good people, um, but not everyone's at that same standard.
Agreed.
But anything else you wanted to hit on, big guy?
Not really. I feel
No.
like we're hitting it pretty good right now.
Good. Good. So, if you are a developing physical therapy student and you have more questions or more things you want to learn about, maybe resources you want to know that maybe Dave and I have, or maybe we've looked into before, feel free to reach out. I mean, I think I talk more about the profession of physical therapy now than what I ever anticipated I would. So, this has been a lot of fun for me. Um, but no, seriously, reach out, guys. We'll have fun with it. But we will see you guys in the next episode.